Hello guys, so today's going to be something a little bit different because I have I just feel like I should talk about this because I do think it has to do with Christianity. I do think it has to do with our life as Christians. Alright, so I was watching Ben Shapiro testify in front of, I believe it's Congress, about free speech and what we should do about it and what's been happening with it, etc. And so I'll be covering two things in this video that watching that video made me think of. So the first is the bill itself that made all of this happen, that Wisconsin. I can't tell if it's actually been passed or if they're trying to pass it or what's happening there. Everything, like titles say is passed and other titles say they're pushing it, so I'm not really sure which one it is. And then the second is the fundamental truth that I see that keeps popping up in all of this political stuff that I'm watching. Basically, like I'll discuss it in a second. So don't worry, I am going to get to the tying all of this in the Bible, so just hang on for the ride for a little bit, okay? So Republicans who control the House or control the state legislature are pushing an Assembly Bill 299 in Wisconsin to protect, they say, conservative voices on campus, right? So this proposal would have established like a council people had to get in front of if they did it wrong, or if someone just thought they were restricting someone else's speech. And so now under the bill, instead of that, they have a Board of Regents for the schools that do it instead. And so if anybody thinks you're restricting their speech, you can run to this Board of Regents, and as they reported on, gets in front of this board, and the board decides whether or not you did anything, right? And I think that's it's bullcrap. We already have laws for this. We don't need more laws for this. We don't need more of this. So that's what started all of it, and I'll leave a link in the description below so you can read for yourself where I found it. So that's just, I think that's stupid. I mean, come on, guys. We have the Constitution for that. We have stuff for that. So as I'm watching the congressional stuff, there's a lady that starts, her name's Miss Fox. And she starts out with this great quote by George Washington about why we should remain free as far as our speech. And I'm going to go ahead and let you watch that now.
George Washington said it perfectly in 1783. If men, or women he might add today, are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter which may involve the most serious and alarming consequences that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us. The freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent, we may be led like sheep to the slaughter.
So that's awesome, right? So I thought it was awesome, and I'll keep that clip probably for the rest of my life and play it every once in a while. So, where I agree with her there, the problem that I have with her speech at the end is she says that one of the best things she ever heard from one of her students is that she taught her students how to think. And I really have a problem with this, okay? It's not because people shouldn't be taught how to think. It's because she's teaching them how to think. In Christian or biblical structure, right, the parents and the family around the child teach them how to think. It's not the government's job. It's not the church's job as far as like, you know, your pastor doesn't teach your kid how to think. It's, as a parent, your job. As a aunt, like I'm an aunt, it's our job to expose them to new things. As grandparents, it's grandparents' job to expose them to new things. It's not the government's job. It's not a teacher's job. If a teacher in college is teaching someone how to think, there's terribly, terribly structural things in this person's life that have gone wrong. I just find it sad that people are not taught how to do this beforehand, right? If there was one rule that my parents did agree on, is that everything we were exposed to taught us something. Right, something that people are different, that's okay or it's not okay, blah, 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 whatever. All right. fundamentally, I believe that gave me a base in life to go forward and think for myself, right? This should not be the role, like I said before, of public schools or colleges, but of parents and families. Another lady who speaks next, Miss Demings, goes on to show how that baseline, that baseline of ideas from her family, from her parents specifically, helped her in life. And I'm going to go ahead and let you listen to that clip now.
My mother was a maid and my father a janitor. But in spite of their lack of material wealth, they gave me everything they had to support me and prepare me mentally, physically, and spiritually to succeed. I am the youngest of 7 children, but the first in my family to go to college. My parents' life lessons helped to guide me in college when it was clear that there were some who did not want me there. When I joined the Orlando Police Department, when women and other minorities were still trying to find their way, my parents' life lessons guided me, and even here, they still guide me in the United States Congress.
So as you can see, when she faced adversity, the life lessons from her family unit is what helped her through it, right? It wasn't really college. It wasn't, oh, the government's got my back. It was, what did mom and dad teach me? And she had success because those lessons were good. They were right. Okay? So as you're going along watching, this thing was 3 hours, so I'm not going to expose you 3 hours of it, but as I'm going along watching this, Mr. Carolla, Adam Carolla, is an atheist comic, all right? Not a Christian, okay? Who says...
There's something I would like to touch on very quickly, which is going through diversity training, going to college. We're all sitting here, first off, under the assumption that 100% of kids go to college. I didn't know anyone who went to college, so I had to figure out a way to be a decent human being, not to be racist, not to be filled with hate, to be tolerant, minus college. I think that starts at home. So if you get to 18 or 19, I believe the cement on the sidewalk of your brain has already dried, and good luck carving your initials into it with diversity training. If you're a bad kid and we get hold of you in college, you're probably just going to be a bad adult. You need to learn to be a good human being from 0 to college instead of us all converting you once you get to college. And especially since more than half the people don't end up in college. So we're sitting here with a grand plan of how to coach everyone up once they get to college. What if they never get to college? What about their parents, and what kind of job are they doing coaching the kids up so that they need no coaching whether they go to college or not? You're not a professor, you never read a book, you never went to college. How are you an expert on this? And I say, well, I'm a journeyman carpenter as well. I've never read a book on carpentry. And who would you like to build your house? Someone who read a book on it, or someone who just did it every day for over a decade? And I learned that all of these problems that we're talking about, free speech, discrimination, hatred toward other people, and drug addiction, violence, crime, it all stems from the family. And when the family is intact, much of this stuff just goes away. You don't have to legislate it away. It just goes away because people are brought up in intact families with decent, caring parents, whatever their color, whatever their background is, and then they produce little decent individuals who go off to college or a job, place of work, and they don't need to be coached up, and they don't need to be legislated, and they don't need to be bloviated by people like us. They grew up in an intact family. So my feeling is all the stuff we're talking about is at the outside of the rim. The hub is the family, and the discussions should center around the family and who is creating these people who think it'd be a good idea to take a baseball bat to the window of a Starbucks in their community.
It's the biblical idea exactly every time he says it, right? And this is the idea that would fix it immediately. It might take time, but as parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and everybody did what they were supposed to do, it would fix this country as far as free speech issues we're having, all this hate and all this other stuff, right? So that's namely parents teaching their kids, right? It's so basic. It's hard to understand how we cannot get it. All right. So in the Bible, this is what the Bible says. Okay. In Deuteronomy 11:7 and 19, this is how it reads. For your eyes have seen all the great work of the Lord that he did. You shall teach them to your children, talking of them when you are sitting in your house, and when you are walking by the way, and when you lay down, and when you rise. It's all the time. It's not just like, how do I say this? It's not just, well, I had 2 hours of teaching today and now we don't teach anymore. Or I had an hour. It's not like that. It's not structured like that. It's every day, everything that you do, all the time. You are teaching them, what does God say about this? What should you do about this? What should you do here? And if you are teaching them, and your parents and the grandparents are exposing them to things, and the aunts and uncles are exposing them to things, and ideas that are different, and they are different people. Like, you don't have a family that is all the same people. So if you're doing it right, these kids are already exposed to people who are way different than them. And that's just the thing that drives me crazy. So what I'm saying is, before college, before you're a free adult, it's the home that should be teaching you how to think. Not public schools, not churches, not private schools. Parents out there, my Christian brothers and sisters who are having children, engage your children. Teach them the laws and the structures and everything of God. That will cause people to not hate, because the thing about Christianity, what does God say is the central tenet of Christianity? There are two, right? Love God with all your heart, your mind, and everything you are, and love your neighbor as yourself. Neither one of those things says anything about hate. Doesn't say anything about killing people. Doesn't say anything. I mean, with just those two being taught, you could change the world, and you will if you teach it. I think that's a big deal. Stuff that's not happening a lot in the church. A lot of times, parents are relying on things like youth pastors, or relying on things like youth workers. They're relying on things like schools and classes and stuff. And quite frankly, as a kid, I did not listen to any of that, and I didn't care. What made me the person I am today was my dad, mostly. My mom taught me some stuff, but my dad was mostly the one who gave any kind of care at all about teaching us anything about being ourselves, or about what's right in the world and what you should do and how you should treat people and everything. And a lot of what he taught us came from the Bible, and it works. It works every time. Let's go out and affect this world for the better, you know? I mean, we can. We have the truth, and it's the absolute truth that works every time. So, that's all I really had to say for today. I just got really passionate about this, and I wanted to say it. I saw Bible in it, and I had to say something. So, until next time, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.